record and begin to share my screen here. And if you've been with us before, hopefully this isn't too tricky of a process. Sometimes this wants to work a little bit better than others. There we go. We're going to back up here. So we want to start right from the beginning. And I want to welcome you all again. Welcome to Test Smart, tips and tricks to ace the test. I am Jen Denton. I have the very fortunate position to be your student success coach here at Essential Education. And I pretty much start and end these sessions the same way by reminding you that our success is based on your success. In essence, your success is our goal. It's what we constantly strive for here, and that goes, of course, beyond just getting your high school equivalency exam. We want to help you all the way up until that point, and even after that point with some helpful suggestions for work, job, and maybe some college tips as well. But today's specific session is on those tips and tricks to ace that upcoming test. One thing that will be super important and helpful for me is if you do want to go on over to that chat window now and let me know which of the exams you're going to be taking. You can just type in GED, HiSET, or TASK, just so I can kind of gear some of this information to the most people today. We'll touch on everything, but I want to make sure that I'm getting people that have jumped into the session today the information that they need. So go ahead and do that if you haven't already. And I want you to look at this young lady. So she looks probably a lot like I did because I have some real test anxieties. And so you should be thinking, oh goodness, well, why is the person that has test anxiety doing this session on testing tips? And I'll tell you why. It's because I had to work really, really hard to overcome some of that testing anxiety. And I had to learn some things, learning how to study and how to take tests. And odds are, if you're here today interested in bettering your test taking skills, then you've said one of the following things. You may have said, I'm just not a good test taker. You may have said, I'm too nervous to concentrate. I always feel like I'm running out of time and I start to panic. I just can't sit still that long. Man, that applies to my son for sure. I get distracted. Or maybe you just are really skeptical about the test. Standardized testing's just taken the life out of you, and you've said to yourself, I just feel like all these questions are just trying to trick me, and who wants to have the odds stacked against me before I even get started? For so many of us, myself included, these statements and these fears are real. And faced with these fears, we really have a biological response that kicks in, and it's called fight or flight. And it happens with anything. It helps when we're in imminent danger. It helps when something surprises us or scares us. And so when it comes to your test taking, it's the same thing. You have the ability to fly away from the situation. Sure, just throw up your hands and say, you know what, I'm just not good at test taking. I can't do this. And you can fly away from it. Or we can work together to learn the tools that we need to take down those fears and have our fight instinct come into play. And the best way to do this, the first point of preparation, is to get to know your test. Since we're going to be fighters, I want you to think about a boxer. And when that boxer enters the ring, one of the first things they do, and I don't even know a whole lot about boxing, but I do know this from watching movies or just listening to my husband talk about things. I do know before that boxer enters the ring, they do some research. They scope out their opponent. They know their signature moves, they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses, they even know their tells when they're getting tired or when they're about to, jump into a new set of moves. Any good champion knows that developing a plan specifically catered to defeat their opponent is a really, really wise thing to do from the onset. And you can do the same for your high school equivalency exam. I'm going to jump and look at chat and see. I think we have one person that shared that they are taking the task. Okay, welcome. I don't know if you're in the state of New York. If you are, congratulations, your test is paid for. I commend New York for that. You get to skip over those test taking fees. If any of our other participants would like to share what test they're taking, that would be helpful as well. But as we get to know our test, this is what we need to do. We need to look for those specific guidelines. Each of your test taking sites has an official test center. Now, you need to get to know this test center. And since we had our tasker share, I'm going to go ahead and jump and look over at their test center with us all together today. But GED has one, HiSET has one, and Task has one. You need to get to know this official website for a couple of different reasons. One, they have great resources right here, you look for it, for test takers that will show you all kinds of things about the test itself, about preparing for, registering, seeing your scores, finding a test center. It's all right here on their website. And I love that Tax has this statement. I've seen it several times. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams and live the life you always imagined. I love that they put that boldly and proudly there on their test center. But if you jump into these test sites, each one will show you how the test is laid out. And one of those places for task is task test details. And if you go to the task test details, it lets you know their major subject areas. Again, all three of these exams, whether it's GED, HiSET, or TASK, they're all going to be covering basically the same type of information: reading, writing, science, math, and social studies. But the way they ask the questions may vary from time to time, and the way the test is formatted can be different. So you need to prepare yourself and be ready for that. So get to know your details at these individual test sites. Alrighty. So in getting to know your test, another thing that you will want to do is to amp up your reading. And I mentioned those subjects. Of course, reading is one of those subjects, and our mind obviously knows, okay, well, reading and writing goes together. So if I'm a solid reader, then that's going to help me with my writing. But one big thing that a lot of our HSE testers miss is reading is fundamental for both the science and the social studies sections of the exams. The test makers are not going to ask you to bring a lot of facts and figures. You aren't going to have to know who won what war in 19 whatever. You aren't going to have to know who the 30-something president of the United States was. They want to know if you can read historical documents and make an analysis on that. Read and understand. For science, again, you don't have to know the periodic table, but they may ask you to read the results of a scientific study and walk through the steps of the scientific method. Reading is super important to all of the subjects. And being able to read and understand the questions themselves, which we'll get to in a second, is fundamental. So if you are somebody that is super confident in your reading, then take even more pride in that, more confidence knowing that that's going to be a really strong asset for you. And if you're somebody that struggles in reading, give yourself grace to spend some more time in that reading preparation, in those reading sections, knowing that the extra effort that you put into reading now will really, really help you down the line, not only in this subject, but multiple subjects as they come. So, in getting to know your test, you also need to understand the types of questions that are asked. And depending on what test you're taking, there are going to be multiple testing types. If you are a HiSET or a task test user, one of the things I encourage you to do at that official testing site is to find out what format your test is going to be administered in. What I mean by that is, if you're taking the GED, I can tell you right now, no matter where you go across the nation at your testing center, you will be taking that exam on the computer. They're going to sit you down in front of a computer. Yes, you're going to have a live proctor, but you will take that exam on the computer with a mouse. And because of that, they can ask you a wide variety of question types. Now, HiSET and Task is a little bit different because some of those testing sites are still pencil to paper, like you see right here, this old bubbling in of the numbers that still scares me to death when I look at it sometimes. But some of the test centers use this method. They use a Scantron method, and then others use a computerized method. So you'll need to be familiar with various question types, but for HiSET and task takers, most likely you're going to have a large number of multiple choice questions, and we will spend a great deal of time talking about multiple choice questions today and how to attack those. HiSET and task users are going to have a majority of multiple choice questions because their test center may be pencil to paper. It may be computerized, and again, you can check that out by going to that test site, checking your individual local testing center by entering your zip code. And then usually there's a little icon next to it that shows a little pencil or shows a computer to let you know what type of exams they administer there at the site. But in general, let's talk about some question types that you might see. Drop-down menus, drag and drop, essay or extended response, fill in the blank, multiple choice, or one that I really don't like, multiple select. And I want to show you what some of those might look like. I know we went through those really quickly, but I want to show you exactly what you might see on the test. Again, if you're GED, let your ears perk up for this because you will see all of these question types. The first one is a drop-down menu. And this, again, it must be in a science or possibly a math. Sometimes those go over. It looks like a science section. It says the level of ibuprofen in the patient's bloodstream increased from, and then you have this drop-down menu, hours, to, and then another drop-down menu with hours. So this is a two-parter. They're asking you to enter two different sets of information. They're asking you to look at the chart, read this question or this statement, and fill it in by selecting answers in a drop-down menu. In a lot of ways, it's like multiple choice because it's giving you possibilities that you can choose in this drop-down, but it's doing it not by selecting a letter corresponding to an answer, but by actually clicking an arrow, hovering over, and then clicking your response. Obviously, if you're taking a test in a pencil to paper format, you can't do a drop-down menu, but if you're on the computer, 9 times out of 10, you will see this type of question, so don't be thrown off by it. Drag and drop. This is one we talked about before. We actually just did this example in our math section for those of you that were able to join us in our coaching session last week on math. But this one, you obviously see complete each equation by dragging an expression and dropping it in the box. You're going to actually click on the answer choice of your choosing down here with your mouse and drag it into the box. So again, they're getting a twofer on this because they're asking you not to just give one drag and drop, but two. This is what these look like. Essay and extended responses, you will have these across the board. Again, if you're pencil to paper, you're going to be writing these essay or extended responses, but if you're in any kind of computerized format, it's going to look something similar to this. You're going to have passages based on pages. You're going to have questions that correlate to those pages and to those sections, and then you're going to be asked for a response. You will have some controls that are here in the box above your response, so just know that you're going to have those options as well, and don't let this throw you off. Fill in the blank, pretty self-explanatory. This one is, again, you're looking at some information, and then this question's asking about the average rate of change, and they physically want you to click in the box and then use your keyboard to put in your answer. Fill in the blank. And this could be in math, but this could also be in the language arts sections or the writing sections when you're actually asked to fill things in a blank within the context of a sentence or a paragraph. Multiple choice. This is the one that we see most frequently. This is geometry question, so it's having us use pi, which we know we're going to get the formulas for that, so we're not going to let that throw us off. We get those formula sheets, they are there, we can use them at will. And multiple choice, again, pretty self-explanatory. If you're bubbling in, you're going to make one choice corresponding to a letter. This one is not letter correspondence because it's done on the computer, and you're going to click in the box of your choice and then move on. So these are some question types that you might see. By far, multiple choice, whether you're seeing them in computer format or on a pencil to paper format, is the most common type of question that you'll see. So let's talk about some ways that we can attack multiple choice questions. The first one is to answer the question in your head. And that seems like an obvious thing, but I don't think a lot of us give ourselves time and space to do that. And what I mean by that is I might read a question and I don't give myself enough time to stop and see if I didn't have those answer choices, what my answer might be. If I had no other help, no other context, and somebody just asked me that question, how might I answer that? Trust me when I say taking the time to stop and do that will help you because you're drawing from your memory bank. You're drawing from your memory stores about what you already might know. And it's going to help you eliminate some of those questions or some of those answer choices as you look for your choice. answer the question in your head, and it's going to build up some confidence before you look at your choices. And then you can do just that. You can look for that answer in the context of your answer choices, but you can also go back and use what they gave you in the test to look for the answer in the test. To kind of dispel a little bit of that fear that the test makers are trying to trick you. I've already mentioned that in science and social studies, they're giving you formulas. They're giving you the historical readings. They don't want you to have to bring a lot of information to the table. They want to provide the answers for you there in the context of the test. So having some background knowledge, answering that question in your head, and then looking for the answer in the test, whether it's in the answer choices themselves, and that helps you to solidify your choice, or going back and looking at the passage, going back and looking at the chart or the data that they gave you. The answer is there somewhere in the test. You just have to use critical thinking to figure it out. Another thing is to eliminate answers you know are wrong. And this is especially helpful if you've already answered the question in your head. If you already kind of have an inkling about what you think the answer might be, it's going to help you see the things that are just blatantly wrong. You'll be able to see those things right off the bat. And once you see that, just mentally check the box, move on. You're not even going to spend precious minutes looking at that answer because you just know automatically that it's wrong. And then along with answering that question in your head, go with your first answer. If you've already got a gut feeling before you even see the answer choices, then you can confirm that answer as one of the choices, look back in the passage or the data, confirm it there, and then get rid of the ones you know are wrong. Going with your first answer is always a great place to start if you have that inkling. But what if you just have no clue? I have people say, well, that sounds all good, but what if I just look at it and I just think, goodness gracious, I have no idea what this is about. I want to give you permission and freedom to guess. Because here's the thing, you aren't given any negative scores. Guessing or getting an answer wrong is not going to take away from your score. But leaving something blank definitely will negate any possibility that you had for achieving more points there. You're not going to gain anything if you don't guess, if you don't have something there. Blanks are not going to help you in the least. Guessing definitely ups your chances in that. But I don't want you to just guess in some willy-nilly crazy spur of the moment thing. I want to take you through a guessing checklist. And I don't know if you've ever thought about having a guessing checklist, but these are some things I want to discuss with you today. So the first thing is the $100 bet rule. And that sounds something like this. So you look at some answer choices. Again, you don't have a really good inkling about what it looks like. And you're like, I don't know, I'm just going to pick this one. Would you just be that willy-nilly in your guessing if somebody said, okay, well, do you want to bet $100? I'm going to guess that you might look at those answer choices a little bit more cautiously and make a more educated guess if $100 was on the line. So ask yourself that question. Then I want you to learn to watch out for absolutes. Very rarely are answer choices with absolutes correct. And here's what I mean by absolutes. If the answer choice says always, all, everything, or the opposite of that, never, always watch out because it can change the meaning of a statement, and absolutes are hardly ever the right choice. Now, I'm not going to say they can never be the right choice, but hardly ever the right choice. So if you already know that statistic and you're guessing anyways, then I would really have a red flag for those absolutes. Again, always, all, everything, or never. Watch out for absolutes and answers because there could be more behind that. Here's another one, slang or informal language. I used this example with a student the other day, and they said, what do you mean by slang or informal language? And I mean it when I specifically come to the answer choices. So let's say that you were just asked to read a passage about the Industrial Revolution in one of the history sections. And the question is asking about the information that you just read about the time period and the historical events in the Industrial Revolution. And the question asks you to find the author's main idea. If one of the answer choices says something along the lines of the author was writing a whole bunch of stuff about the Industrial Revolution, a whole bunch of stuff. That's an example of slang or informal language. Very, very rarely is the answer. I don't even go so far as to say never. I've never seen an answer on a standardized test use informal language like that, a whole bunch of stuff. They're usually a lot more specific, a lot more professional, a lot more detailed. So if you ever see slang or informal language, most likely not the answer. So you can go ahead and get rid of that one. Here's another one, IDing opposites. Now, while this isn't always the case, IDing opposites can be a trigger to you that one of those two is the answer. And I'll show you an example of that in a second, but you'll have to be able to kind of, understand the vocabulary that's involved in that. But usually when a test maker has opposites in the test answer choices, they're checking to see your knowledge on that given topic. They're checking to see if the words just look familiar or if you really understand it. So when they put opposites as answer choices, one of those choices is almost always the answer. And so now you've narrowed down your 5 choices to 2 if you use that as a rule for guessing. Here's another one, and it just makes sense. Eliminate on reason. If you read the question, you already kind of have a gut reaction to it, and you can look at those and you can knock out some things, knock them out. Again, anything you can do to narrow those options down and if you're making that $100 bet, make it a higher probability, then eliminate based on reason and just look at the answer choices that are left. And then here's another one, choose and stick to a plan. What do I mean by that? Well, I've read some studies about guessing, and test makers and test takers have shown that if you go into a test with a plan, okay, so I'm going to use all the things I know about questions and about answers. I'm going to apply all these things, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go through my guessing checklist. But if at the end of the day, I just still don't know, I'm going to choose A, or I'm going to choose B, or I'm going to choose C. That sounds silly because that answer can never be the right answer across the board. But what that does is that gives you a plan that you can stick to. It gives you a game plan and it gives you confidence to look at that and say, you know what, I did the best I possibly could on this question. I put all of these tips and tricks into practice. I still don't know, so I'm just going to choose B and move on. That way you're not wasting any more time and it gives you the ability to look at the questions that you do have a basis to answer. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's look at some examples of putting this guessing checklist into practice. Before we jump into these, please ask some questions. I'd love to hear from you guys. Ask some questions in the chat, ask some questions in Q&A, and I will help you in any way I can. So let's look at these sample questions. So here's one about oppositely charged objects. And it basically wants us to talk about oppositely charged objects. It's not really asking a question, it's just putting it out there. Oppositely charged objects do what? A, attract, B, repel, C, may attract or repel, D, attract, then repel. There's a couple of different tips that we can use, or at least come to my mind when we look at this problem. And the first thing I see is I see 2 opposites. I see attract and I see repel. If I use my guessing strategy, I'm going to know right off the bat that there's a high likelihood that my answer is either going to be A, attract, or B, repel, because those opposites are in there. And maybe I'm scrambling at this point. Maybe I don't remember a lot about charged objects or the science behind it all. So I'm going to have to jump into my memory bank to critically think about something. And maybe, just maybe, I use some common sense that my grandma gave me when I was dating, saying, oh, honey, sometimes opposites attract. And I remember that is how that saying goes. It's opposites attract. So if I've narrowed down the opposites, and now I know opposites attract, then I can look and make a confident guess here that oppositely charged objects, A, attract. And that, in fact, is the answer. So try to make a connection. If you can base it on fact, that's always your best route, but it may be something based more on common sense or logic when it comes down to making your answer choice. And again, here we were able to ID those opposites, and that narrowed down the field right off the bat. Let's look at this one. So this is a sample question in reading, and this is actually a sample question from the GED. So this is legit sampling. So this is a section from The Outsiders. Great book, great play. If you've not read that, by the way, if you have time to read for pleasure these days, most likely, if your schedule's anything like mine, the sessions are few and far between. But it's Nothing Can Stay Gold. It's related on this idea of staying golden. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. And the question asks us specifically about lines 2 and 7. It says in lines 2 and 7, which literary technique does the author use? If this is your strength, then you're jumping in head first. If this is not your strength, you may need to get creative in your answer and in utilizing some of those guessing strategies. So, literary techniques. I look at my answers. All of these are literary techniques. I don't see any kind of slang language in there, apostrophe, alliteration, personification, metaphor, automatopoeia. I might recognize some right off the bat. I remember, okay, automatopoeia is that crazy word where words are spelled like they sound, like boom, pop, crunch, those types of things. And I don't see any of that in this passage. So I can go ahead and knock that one out right away. Apostrophe, I know what an apostrophe is, and there's no apostrophe in lines 2 or 7, so I know it can't be that one. So now I've narrowed down to 3 choices. Metaphor. I always get metaphor and simile mixed up, but I think that's one of the like or as ones. And if I look at lines 2 and 7, they don't have like or as. Her hardest hue to hold, so dawn goes down today. There's no like or as in there, so I think I'm going to eliminate that. So now I'm down to alliteration and personification. Her hardest hue to hold. Oh, there's a lot of H words in line 2. Let's look at line 7. So dawn goes down today. Ooh, there's a lot of D words in that line. So if I'm looking at alliteration and personification, even if I don't remember what those terms are, I can kind of figure it out. Personification does have the word person in it, and I don't really see that either one of these lines pertains to a person or making something sound like a person. So I really don't think it's personification. And now maybe a light bulb goes on and I think, oh my goodness, I remember alliteration is that thing where they use a lot of the same sounds in one sentence. And ding, 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 her hardest hue to hold. So dawn goes down today. Lines 2 and 7 both have alliteration, and you can mark that one and move on. Obviously, that took us some time to work through this. So not every question is going to be that way. Just know that when you're managing your time. We'll talk a little bit about managing our time as we go forward, that some of these may take more time than others. So if you can narrow it down, narrow it down. If it just gets too impossible, then just invoke your guessing tool and move on. The plan that you have to come in this case, if I'd picked B, then I was right anyway. So there we go. Alrighty, another thing that you'll need to do is understand about how to evaluate answers. We talked about question types and how to evaluate those question types. We talked about guessing to answer the questions that we don't know right off the bat. So now let's talk about evaluating answers. First one, obviously, it should be, but so many of us miss the boat on this. Directions, directions, directions. We might look at something, we've taken a ton of practice tests, we might look at the actual test and say, I think I know what this is going to ask, I'm just going to go ahead and move on. Don't fall into that trap. Make sure that you look closely, that you realize that they are not trying to trick you, but they are asking for specific information. So you have to read those directions. Especially look for words like not or except. I'll give you an example of that in just a second. But when you have an answer that has not or except in it, or the directions have not or except, you're negating some meaning and you actually have to look at something from an opposite perspective. So always pay attention when you see words like not or except. Always pay attention when you see words that are bold or underlined. Always pay attention when you see keywords. Now, sometimes those keywords will be bold or underlined. Sometimes they will be put into italics. Pay attention to those things in the directions, because that's one way that, believe it or not, those test makers are trying to help you. And then just ask yourself. Ask yourself lots of questions as you go along. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, your fellow test maker or fellow testers in the room may not want you to ask yourself out loud. So learn to ask yourself on your own, but ask yourself lots of questions as you go along. So let's look at kind of putting those things into practice of how to evaluate the answers for the questions, the way the questions are asked themselves. Okay, so let's look at this one. Based on the passage, which statement is fact, not opinion? Right? So if the test asked us this, based on the passage, so clearly they've given us a passage, which statement is fact, not opinion? In this case, they're defining fact for you. They're giving you a huge clue. They're giving you this word not. They're telling you, hey, pay attention. I want you to look for what's factual, what's true, not an opinion, not an opinion. So read that carefully. That way, when you evaluate your answer choices, you can really scrutinize the answer choice to say, ooh, is this a fact or is this just someone's opinion? Because that direction told me not opinion, and it'll help you zero out some of those choices. Here's another one. The question might ask, which of the following is not a conclusion based on the above passage? So in this case, they've given you a passage and they're not wanting you to come up with something that really makes sense. They're asking you to not find a conclusion that you would come to. So that means of your, say, 5 answer choices, 4 of them are going to make sense with the passage. 4 of them are going to be conclusions that you could make based on the passage. But that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the one that is not a conclusion in the passage. Got a raised hand. So with that raised hand, go ahead and pop into chat or question and answer. Ask the question there in the Zoom chat and we will get to that. So look for those words not or except. They're super duper important because not changes the meaning of the question. And in this case, they gave it to you not only with that exemption word, but they also put it in bold. So pay attention to that. Here's another one. Great one. All of the following are examples given by the author, except here, if you've got 5 answer choices, 4 of them are going to be examples given by the author. 4 of them are going to be there in the test, but 1 of them is not, and that one that's not is your answer. All of the following are examples given by the author, except. You're looking for the one exception. What's the keyword here? Except. Answers are in the test. You're looking for the exception. Alrighty, so let's stop. If anybody has any questions, again, jump into that Q&A, jump into that chat. I want to help you. I want this to be as interactive as possible. Who knows, maybe your question can be the same one that somebody else here is asking today. So don't be afraid to ask that question. Okay, so we've talked about some practical things that you may have thought about when you were signing up for this session. Okay, looking at test taking tips, looking at ways that you can better prepare for the actual exam. But I want to talk to you about something that you may not have taken into account that really, really can set you up for success, or if you don't follow some of these things, set you up for a hard time. And that is looking at what you do the day before you take that test. I used to manage, it feels like a different lifetime ago, but I used to manage marathons for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. People would sign up to run marathons in honor or in memory of someone battling cancer, and they would help to raise money for the society. And so we would take marathon runners really all over the world, these amazing trips, these amazing marathon settings, and Alaska was still one of my favorite ones. It was beautiful, but I digress. So, one of the things that we would do, obviously, just like you, these marathon runners were training for something. They'd been training for something for weeks, for months, just like you've been preparing for weeks, for months toward this goal. But we had some things that we did with those runners that I think are super applicable to you guys as you get ready to take this test. And here's one of them: recharge. The day before the exam, you need to recharge. What does that mean? Stop studying. You heard the success coach here tell you to stop studying. I've had students call me in a panic saying their internet's down and they take the test in an hour and they just want to, do a couple more lessons. And I literally feel like I have to walk them off a cliff where I'm like, baby, if it's not in your head right now, it's not really going to stick there for the test. And so the best thing you can do is plan ahead, prepare well before, and then the day before, give your body and your mind a chance to recharge by stopping your study. Just letting all that information sink in so you're fresh and you're ready to take on that exam with confidence. Do something fun. Go out with your friends. Now, be careful about your nighttime activities the night before because you don't want to wake up with a headache or anything that some of those activities might bring you the next morning. But do something fun. Just take your mind off of the exam. Take your mind off the weight of the exam that some of you might feel. Do something fun. And then here's a big one: sleep. The studies that show how sleep helps to improve your memory are endless. So make sure that you get a good night's sleep and get prepped for the next day. Not really sure what that means. I'm going to help you with that by giving you some checklists now. Test day checklist, location. Everyone has a different test center. We've talked a little bit about how the exam is going to be administered in a different way at those test centers, at those locations. While some of our students have test centers super close to them, I talked to someone who lives kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas last week, and their test center is about 45 minutes away from them. So you're going to need to plan ahead in knowing where that location is. I want you to double check the day and time of your test. Don't get confused. Set calendar alerts, set reminders on your phone, whatever you have to do, whatever, if you still have a pen to paper date planner, make sure you've got lots of reminders that you aren't going to miss that day and time that you've scheduled for your test. Know your location. If you aren't sure where your location is, again, those top 3 sites that we talked about at the beginning of the session, that's where you need to go when it's time to schedule your test. And you can even check that out now after you establish an account by entering your zip code, city or state, and they'll show you where your closest location is. Plan your travel time, especially if you're in a more urban area and there is going to be travel, or if you're using public transportation, then make sure you're making that account. You're accounting for all of that ahead of time. Paperwork. Now, this is going to vary from person to person and situation to situation, but in general, here's some of the paperwork things that you need to know for test day. Test registration information. That's across the board. You're going to have that. You're going to have a license or some sort of identification that may be mandated by your state or by your test center, so make sure you know what those things are. Proof of residency. This only applies to states that require residency. There are some states that do not require you to be a resident of that state to take the GED, the HiSET, or the test, but if yours does, you will have to have proof of residency, and they can give you some examples of what that might look like. Permission and exemption forms. If you are an underage tester, I just posted what I think is an informative article on our e-board today about things that you need to be aware of if you're really under the age largely of 18, but in some states 19, those permission and exemption forms. And then of course, if you have accommodations, any proof of accommodations that you'll need as well. Social Security number and card. And then payment. Again, our task taker, I'm hoping that you're in New York because that means it's free. You don't have to pay for anything. I'm always happy for you guys. And if you didn't know already, there are some states that are upwards of, gosh, $160, $180 to take the full gamut of tests. So if you're in a lower cost state, be thankful for that because that can really weigh on people sometimes. So don't forget your method of payment that day. All right, your supplies. Number 2, pencils and erasers. This is especially important if you are at a pencil to paper facility. You want to make sure that you have that. You want to make sure you have layers. This is a silly thing, but we talked about not wanting to get distracted. I don't know about you, but if I'm uncomfortable temperature-wise, that can really be a distraction. If I get super cold, or my big thing is if I get super hot. So you'll want to make sure you take layers because you just don't know what to expect when you get to the testing center, what that classroom is going to look like, or the room that it's in. Snacks. Take snacks. Don't be a martyr and try to get through this whole thing without having a snack. You're going to have breaks. Take advantage of them, man. Take your snacks. All right, test day checklist. All in all, we are going to put these slides together and you'll get this in a follow-up email along with kind of like a top 5 of what today's session was. So you'll have this checklist sent in that follow-up email. All right, the day of, remember, you're going to eat a good breakfast. Don't study because you're taking your time to recharge. Do keep track of your time, take into account your travel time, and then make sure you double check all of your supplies. During the test, this is for you clock watchers. Manage your time. There's a balance here because if you're somebody that you really fall into that category of anxiety of, oh, I just never have enough time, learn to manage your time. Put that as part of your guessing plan, to grant yourself grace when you get to a question that you don't know. Give yourself an extra boost of confidence. Say, you know what, I planned for this. I know ahead of time that I don't want to waste time on this type of question. I'm going to go with my guessing plan, and so B it is, or A it is, or C it is, and then move forward with confidence. That allows you not to dwell on that question because you had a plan ahead of time. That's just one of the ways you can manage your time. You might know that certain sections are going to take you longer than others, and account for that, and then try to buzz through the ones that you do have a solid understanding of. Have a plan, again, whether it's a guessing plan or it's a question and answer plan. Figure out what works best for you and follow through. Use all of your time. There is no extra credit for being, I finished first, or I had 25 minutes. Can I get 25 extra points? It doesn't work that way. So don't waste your time. Use all of it. It's there for a reason. They wouldn't give you an hour and a half if it's something that you should finish in 25 minutes. You shouldn't finish it in 25 minutes. Use all of your time. Take breaks. They give them to you for a reason. Get some water, walk around, get some fresh air, shake those proverbial cobwebs out of your head, eat your snack, and take advantage and go back fresh. Hydrate. Make sure you're drinking water. As a society, we just don't drink enough water. My children are so tired of me telling them, asking them, did you drink water today? Or if I have a headache, did you drink water today? We need to hydrate. Your brain needs it for fuel. Think about it like that. It's gas in the tank. And again, those snacks. Can you tell I like snacks? I keep talking about snacks. And here's a big one. Don't focus on passing. And you're like, Jen, that is ridiculous. That is the whole point that I'm here is I want to pass this test. So tell me not to focus on passing. That's just ridiculous. Here's what I mean by that. And take it as a selfish thing. If you are so focused on what's writing on this test, your full attention cannot be on the task at hand. It cannot be on the question at hand. It cannot be on the passage at hand, the chart at hand, whatever's in front of your face. If you're so focused on passing, there's a part of your brain that is stealing your attention, and get this, is stealing your time. And that time is precious because you do want to use all of it, and you want to make sure that you can apply it in the best way. So as much as you can, and I know it's a tall order. I know I'm preaching to the choir on this because I've done the same thing. Try as much as you can not to focus on what if I don't pass, or what if I pass but I only pass it by these amount of points. Is that going to be okay? Is that going to, don't play out those scenarios. Just take it one step at a time. And my biggest suggestion is to think positive thoughts. And you might think this is stupid, this is a Miss Mary Sunshine type of encouragement to you, but I love her picture and she's so sweet. Think positive thoughts, because what they do at minimum, is give you confidence. If you walk in that testing door with your head slung low, with a constant self-talk that's already saying, oh, I'm probably not going to pass. Oh, I didn't study fractions or decimals as much as I should. Oh, I should have done this. Oh, I should have done that. That's over. You've got the here and the now. That is not going to help you. It is only going to hinder you. So even if you're living in a state of denial for that moment, go into it with as positive an attitude as you possibly can. I promise you it will make a difference. I promise you. Let's look at some of those things. I'm not a good test taker. Don't let bad experiences in the past define your future. You are here. You may not have had a traditional route to school, and that's okay. The past is the past. We are here to look toward the future. I get too nervous to concentrate. Just take it one question at a time. Remember your skills and have confidence in those skills. I always run out of time. My biggest suggestion here is to practice. manage and practice that timing. You know, if you're a student with essential education, you know you have your practice tests that are built in there. Those are timed. They are set to, they don't change in degree of difficulty. Practice test 1 is the same degree of difficulty as practice test 4. They're all within that time range. They're all there to set realistic testing principles. Practice test online, different things like that. Even if you're taking a test in a workbook, have a friend or a family member hold you accountable, set a stopwatch, let you know when your time is up, manage and practice that time. You're going to fail. You're going to run out of time from time to time if you're somebody that's worried about that and you need to work on it. But then just figure out what you need to do better for next time. Manage and practice that timing. Just as much as you study your subjects, practice your timing if this is something you struggle with. Can't sit still that long, totally get ya. That's what the breaks are for. They put them there for a reason. They don't expect anybody to sit there for, you know, the 14 hours that this test can feel like sometimes if you're taking all the subjects. The other thing is to consider breaking up that exam, taking the exams by subject. You can do that. In an earlier session today, someone was just studying for the high set math because they're just going to go in and take that subject by itself. So that's something that might work for you if you don't feel like you could sit there for the entire subject matter test to be administered. I get distracted. I hear you. One big thing is choose your seating wisely. Again, you might not know exactly what your testing center is going to look like, if it's going to be a classroom, if it's going to be a large lecture hall, whatever it's going to look like. If you're somebody that literally gets distracted by the squirrel out the window, then don't sit by a window. Don't sit by, if you're somebody that is freaked out about the time, don't sit someplace where you can hear the clock ticking, or, you know, that maybe you have to physically turn around to see the clock if you're going to be distracted by looking up at the time. Choose your seat wisely. Know yourself well. Know what works and what doesn't work for you. And this can help you weed out those distractions. And another thing is to consider those accommodations. If you have a legitimate learning difference, notice I didn't say disability, could be a diagnosis, but if you have a legitimate learning difference, there are accommodations that are available to you. In some cases, you do have to apply for those. Some states require different documentation for that, and you'll have to check that out on an individual, state-by-state, case-by-case basis. But again, where you're going to find that information is the same at those 3 major testing center links that I shared with you at the beginning of the session. Feel like the questions try to trick you. Hopefully I've dispelled some of that. Don't overthink it, and just know that the bulk of the answers are there in the test. Yes, you have to bring critical thinking skills to the table, but they want you to succeed. They've written these questions in such a way so that you can use the information that's given there in the test to be sure of yourself and be confident on test day. I want to look at some of the questions that we had. There's one in Q&A. Oh, how much longer? We typically go, I think we say 45 minutes, but we typically end up going about 50 minutes sometimes. So a little bit, just a little bit longer. We are almost done. I just want to make sure that we answer these questions that are up here. We've got some in chat too. If extra testing time is needed, what are the requirements? That is a really great question, Shannon. You will need to contact the task testing board, especially for the state of New York, because your application process is a little bit longer because they do support the payment for that test. They have some different hoops that you have to jump through. Just jump through the hoops and just be thankful again that you don't have to pay for that test, but they will ask you some questions. And so extra test time, typically there's 2 different applications. There's the application and registration for the exam itself, and then most testing sites have a completely different accommodations section. They might have some different paperwork. Definitely, if you have a diagnosis, you have got a really, really strong case to get extra testing time or to get a quiet single testing environment. So if you have those things, you have that documentation, please, please, please pursue that, because that will definitely be a help to you. All right. So Samuel, your question is answered. How much longer? Not much longer at all. We are going to go through some quick testing takeaways. Plan. Simple as that. Plan your studies, but plan for the test. Practice. Practice your timing. Practice those lessons. Practice answering lots of different types of questions, knowing that you will be asked different types of questions, so those don't throw you off. Pep pep yourself up. You can do this. If you're here in a coaching session, you're obviously putting time into your preparation. So give yourself high fives for that. Give yourself credit for your effort. And then power up. Make sure that you're recharging, that you're getting enough sleep, that you're fueling your body as well as your mind, and you are ready to take on the test day with confidence. Everything we covered here today, plus more, is in a workbook that we have available on our website. If you go to passged.com and to our bookstore, you will be able to access all of our workbooks, but Smart Skills really is a good one for study, motivation, and testing. We are always here to help you. Your success is our goal. We thank you for joining us today. I've got our student help hotline on there as well as my personal email. Reach out, let us know what you need. We want to be here for you. Thanks so much. Have a great day, and we hope to see you again.